My name is Kay Byfield, and this is your ArtSpeaks Studio moment from ArtSpeaks Studio in Dallas, Texas. And today we're going to talk about how you make corrections in a watercolor painting. Watercolor gets a really bad rap. My students, when they first come into class, always say that the reason they haven't tried watercolor is because they heard it was so hard that you have to always get it perfectly right, that you can't ever make corrections. And that's just not true. You can make corrections all over the place. What you can't correct, however, is a bad composition, a bad design. If the painting doesn't work structurally before you start, then you can't correct that in the middle of the painting. But I would argue that you can't do that in most media, even if the medium is opaque. But with watercolor, because you can see through the paint to some extent always, it's transparent, if you go to paint over something else, even if you've erased it, as I'm going to show you how, you end up with some ghost of that previous form. So the important thing is to have a good design before you ever start the painting. So the key to making changes in watercolor is like making changes in anything. First, you have to determine what the problem is. Do you have paint where you don't want it? Do you have the wrong color paint where you don't want it? Do you have paint that's too dark where you don't want it? Or do you need to increase the contrast either in value, light and dark, or in color? So let me show you some examples of how this works. So here we have a sheet that I've covered with staining colors of paint. It's got alizarin crimson and phthalo Winsor green and ultramarine blue, and it's got some Winsor violet in it. These colors are staining colors. And supposedly that means that they're going to stain the paper in such a way that perhaps you won't be able to remove it. But look at this. Now, I'm never going to get back to white paper, but as you can see, using a natural sponge, the animal, the skeleton of the sea animal, we can get back very close to white. Not white, there is a stain to it, there is a bit of pigment in it, but it's very close to white, and compared with how dark it was around it, it appears almost white. And if we want to remove a specific shape, we just make a little template like that, and in the shape that we want, and we use our natural sponge to lift it away. And again, it's not white, but it has lifted it back to a much lighter color. And one of the cool things about this is that you can go back when it's dry and you can paint right into it. And even though that's yellow and this is kind of a purplish color, I'm still getting a fairly intense yellow. And if I want to paint in it with a blue, the blue works as well. Or I could choose a pink and I could paint that shape that I had to lift out right back in a bright color. So it will actually work. And if you don't want to use a stencil and you don't want to use a natural sponge, you can do the same thing with a brush. So here's my brush. And if I paint into my staining colors, I'm still getting a nice white line. Here's the photograph that I used as a reference. It gives me some suggestions of places that could get dark to push the goldfish out. It gave me some suggestions about color, but I did not follow it slavishly. I'm hoping to make the painting better than the original photograph. So now I'm going to lift out some things. I'm going to reapply some color to brighten it up a little bit, and I'm going to add a little bit more contrast to push some things forward. Okay, so the first thing that's really bothering me with this painting is I've slopped some paint here that I need to get rid of. So I'm just going to do like I did before and lift that out. And it was blue, but I've been able to get most of it to go away. All right, now I've got a bit of orange slopped up there. I'm going to lift that out a little bit. I end up with a big hole right there. I'll fix that in a bit. Let's see, I've got some light over here where I lifted out earlier that I need to go back and redo the paint. Now the way I'm going to do this, I want the tail to look kind of filmy and soft, so I'm going to lay in a little bit of water first, and then I'm going to let the paint do its thing. Oh, that's not quite the right color. Let it come along here and paint back into that. And like anything else, if you repair one thing, sometimes it means you have to repair other things as well. So I'm taking that and letting that bleed into the rest of the painting, and I'll go back with some darker colors later in those areas. But it looks watery, and that's what I really have in mind, as long as it doesn't look like a patchwork. Okay, now I need to do a similar kind of thing to the fish over here, but I think I'm going to fix the fish itself first. Brighten it up. I've already lifted some color on there, so now I'm going to mix up a nice bright orange, apply that to my fish. You could see, I hope, how intense that color is. It just brightens it right up, even though I had some pretty dull orange on there. Now it's a lot brighter. And of course it'll dry lighter, but now I've got it's a little too bright there to go with the rest of the fish, so I'm going to have to add some other bright other places so it doesn't look like that fish is in pieces. Okay, taking my cue off of the paint and add a little orange down here, not because there was much of it in the photograph, but just because I need to repeat that somewhere. Okay, so that helped. Now, I want to push out the shape of the fish, so I'm going to add some dark down there. And what I'm trying to do is get a kind of an interesting but not nameable color that contrasts with the shape of the fish, and will just kind of push that fish forward. I already had some color in there, but I don't have to worry about matching it, because as long as I don't make it obvious that it doesn't. For instance, if it was green and then I abruptly changed to red or something else. But these are all neutrals, and they go to the green side and the purple side and different colors, and so it all looks like it relates to each other. Now the last thing I'm going to do is go back to my correction model, and I'm going to lift out where the blue and the orange are overlapping just a little bit, so it doesn't look like there's an outline around the fish. And I have to, so that the fish looks like it merges with the environment around it. So these are tips for how to save a painting when it's got some problems, and almost every painting does at some point. You wait until the end, you see what really needs to be adjusted, and then you lift, you paint darker around something, you paint into something, you change the color on something, and you usually can make the painting work. So until next time, happy painting.